you won't notice this as you take the survey, but we weighted the questions based on what's most impactful for the lake. So the questions that are in the red over there, like impervious surfaces, like your hard surfaces, your house, your parking area, your sidewalks, your decks, how much vegetation there is. Do you have a seawall or not? Do you get rid of all of your aquatic plants or not? And are you creating an unnatural beach? All of those are going to have way more impact on reducing the resiliency and reducing the ecosystem, overall health of the lake, than just picking up your pet waste and fertilizer. Now, they're important, but if you're maintaining a healthy shoreline, a healthy property management, your pet waste and your fertilizer issues are not going to have as much of an impact. And we pulled this information from a couple of guides. The conservation guidelines for Michigan inland lakes was created by our Michigan Department of Natural Resources. There's a lot of research done on that. At my booth back there, there's a copy of that if you want to take a look at it. And then Vermont, they also have a program called LakeWise. Theirs is in statute, and not online, but they pulled together a nice little document to help us understand, okay, what are we trying to manage for? And so how deep do you go? And so it gives you a better idea of if you're trying to manage for frogs, or you're trying to manage for salamanders, how deep should your buffer go? So it just gives you start to think about what's going on your property. So when we work through these questions, we try to be consistent with what our DNR guidelines are, and we also build in a lot of flexibility because we know every property is different. There's a lot of built environment out there as well. So how do we build in the flexibility of the property's makeup? And also, how do we challenge people to be better stewards and make changes where they can make? So each question will have a page, and it'll look just like this. And it'll be different options. So this one is about how much percentage of impervious surfaces is 0 to 24% or 75% or greater hard surfaces. And do you have to go out and measure? No, it's just use your best judgment based on what you know about your property. And then the other thing is below on each page these drop-down boxes where you can actually find graphics and information about why this is important and what we're looking for, and how do you figure this out. You'll find graphics like this to help you visualize what we're talking about. Way over to the left is pretty much, what we're trying to get away from. All lawn, maybe one tree, a lot of impervious surfaces, and then as you move towards the right, so you can visually think about what your property looks like. There are 3 recognition levels, and if you register at the end, and your property actually qualifies, you're provided with a certificate that's got your name on it, your lake name, and the date, and it's also will be color-coded by which different level, and you can print that off. And you can go back in and print it off whenever you want. And there is an option to purchase a sign. So this is our big sign. We originally had 3 different sizes, but we're going now to this large size, just from a management standpoint, and they're available for purchase through the Michigan Lake and Streams Association. They're about $40 including shipping. And the reason why we have a sign, it's not a requirement to have a sign, it's definitely an option. In particular, in this lower part of Michigan, it's really good to be able to promote this and say, you're doing the right thing. And you don't look like that crazy neighbor out there. It's why is your property all weedy? It's really about showing what we want and trying to push that envelope about that culture change, rather than people bringing the city here out to the lake. Let's maintain this lake culture. So at the end, if you register, this is what it'll look like. You can review your answers. You can't go back and change them, but you can go back and say, oh, what did I answer? And you can get back to the information pieces as well. And then you're also provided with areas for improvement. They're not incredibly detailed, but they'll give you some general recommendations based on your answer. So if you answer that, oh, I only have like 10, 15, 20% of vegetation in my buffer zone, the recommendation was like, hey, you answered this, you might want to consider increasing your vegetation. And you can print it off as well. So you don't have to go back in, you can just print it off. And so you can take those recommendations and start talking to your contractor about it as well. Or you can do the work yourself. You can go back, and if you make changes, you can go back in and take the survey again. It'll archive your first survey, and so you'll be able to track. It's like, oh, you know what, I got a bronze level the first time, or if I didn't qualify at your starter level, then you can go back and take it again and you could qualify. Not everybody is going to be able to qualify, and the reason being is there are so many properties out there that are completely overbuilt that you're just not going to be able to qualify. And we did this for a reason. It doesn't mean that we're eliminating people on purpose and saying it's like, oh, you're a bad person kind of thing. The reason is we have a lot of lakes out there and a lot of lakeshore properties that we still have a lot of hope for, and we want to try to prevent that. The biggest challenge is going to be seawalls. There are properties with seawalls that have large enough properties that are not completely overbuilt that would be able to qualify. It would take a lot of work and a lot of like the rest of the property has to be really highly vegetated, low impervious surfaces, etc. But properties like this with seawalls, they're just never going to be able to qualify because the seawall is just way too large, way too close, and how the rest of the property is just filled with impervious surfaces. And some people say, well, wait, I bought my property like this. It's like, well, the thing is like, we have to set some standards, and it's just not going to work like that. We can't say that that's okay. Yep, you bought that property, and that's fine, and that's the property that you wanted to buy. But if you wanted something different, then you needed to buy a different property. The other thing, other lake programs do eliminate properties completely with seawalls. We chose not to do that. And the reason why we chose not to do that was because we have so many seawalls already in Michigan. And so as soon as we say, it's like, oh, if you have a seawall, you can't even attempt to qualify for this. And what we got to is like, well, there are still a lot of other things that you can do to help reduce the impacts of a seawall. And so even if you have a seawall, there may be an opportunity for you to be able to qualify. So that's why we didn't completely eliminate properties with seawalls. You will also find graphics like these to help you find where your particular zones are. We have like 3 or 4 different ones because your shoreline zone is going to be the most different from everybody else's. It could be very narrow, it could be very large. So these are provided to give you a guide on to help you apply them to your property. They're not going to always 100% apply to every single different property. So what we just ask is like, okay, use these graphics and use your best judgment. And you'll see pictures as well annotated to give you an idea of like, okay, the one on the right is a very narrow shoreline zone. It's like 3 inches. The one on the left, it's about 3 feet at least. So that's where people need to focus is, well, where's my zones? So to give you, going back to the weighted question, what you see is what percentage of buffer zone has trees, shrubs, grasses, flowers beyond turf grass? Because for us, turf grass doesn't provide any kind of habitat value. Does that mean you have to have no lawn at all? No. What we're trying to is what do you need? How do you need to use your property? And if you don't need that much lawn, then what can you do? So in this case, this was a gold level property, and it'll look at the green is the best of the best at the gold level. And going further is the reddest, the worst of the worst is less than 10%. So if you have less than 10%, there's a lot of work you can do. And if you look to the left of the property to the left over here, there's no shoreline vegetation there. There's no vegetation within the buffer zone area, and it's eroding for probably multiple reasons, from access issues and also from wave issues. Brian started talking about this a little bit, about different things that you can do to help maintain your access. We're saying, yep, you're at the lake for a reason. You want to access it. You want to enjoy the lake. You want to relax. There are ways you can do that and still be able to sit at the edge of the lake, still have access. You may be able to put a pathway through the woods, cut the lower branches so you have a view, so you're not eliminating the trees. You could just have a small little lawn to the edge in both of these areas. And one of the recommendations from DNR is like 25% or less of your property should be used for enjoying and recreational access issues. So there are a lot of options, and the configuration can be different for every single property. In this picture, every single one of these properties would not qualify. But I see a lot of really good things in here already. Is that I don't see any seawalls, and there is a lot of aquatic vegetation that they're not removing. That's really important. I think there's maybe one or two properties that wouldn't qualify, even if they put vegetation back on the land, because there's so much impervious surface. But the rest of those properties, all of them have a potential to be able to qualify for stewards if they started revegetating the rest of their property. Because there's just a lot of good things there. So when I see these things, it can be pretty depressing going around lakes and seeing what's not there. And I also end up changing my mindset. It's like, okay, what could be there? How do you recreate? How do you have fun recreating and be creative out there and create? There's a lot of different ways you can create art, and talk about cues to care, the benches out there, little artwork, and so that your neighbors would feel, it's like, hey, this is a really great idea. One of the